I'm going to speak today about kibud vaem. What's the limit? At what point do you say, okay, this is too much and I give in? Right? You don't have to. Obviously, you don't have to give up your life for kibud vaem. It's not one of the three mitzvot you have to die for. But what is the limit of kibud vaem? Right? It's obviously a very important mitzvah. It's one of the 10 commandments. Where do we draw the line for kibud vaem? So there's a passage in the Jerusalem Talmud. We've all probably had stories in the past when parents asked for extreme cases, or on the contrary, when we asked our kids for something and the kid said, "No, I'm not going to do this." Right? Some part of that was for some people, another part was for more people. As parents, we'd always feel that our kids should listen to us, and as children, we always feel like our parents should not be demanding this from us. Is there a cutoff point at which point you say, okay, I do not have this mitzvah does no longer apply to me? Any thoughts? In the Talmud, we see that if God tells you to respect your parents, right, and then it says you have to respect God in that pasuk. So kibud vaem doesn't apply when it comes in confrontation with respecting God or listening to God or doing a mitzvah. That even applies, according to most rabbis, to mitzvah d'Rabbanan. So if the rabbi says to do something, respecting your honors is only because God told you to, or that God told you to respect your parents. So you don't respect your parents when it comes in conflict with respecting Hashem. So that would be a good example. But in general, your parents ask for something legitimate. Is there a point at which you say, okay, I'm not obligated to respect my parents and go through this? Is there too big of an ask for kibud vaem? So do you have to go financially out of pocket for your father for kibud vaem? It's a good question. Do you or do you not?
Sorry?
Good question. Do you have to financially lose for kibud vaem? That would be a good example, right? So the Jerusalem Talmud, it is an interesting passage there that says that somebody has to respect his parents, and thereby he won't be working, and even if it means he'll have to go knocking on doors to collect money. That's the extent to which someone has to do kibud vaem. In the Babylonian Talmud, we have a story about Tama ben Netina. He was a non-Jewish man, and his father had a paraduma, his father had a diamond. Yeah, I'm being corrected. His father had a diamond, and the diamond was in a safe, and the key for the safe was under his pillow. And he didn't sell it to not wake up his father. So we see kibud vaem is even in a great financial loss, right? Does someone have to spend money on his father? That the Talmud has a disagreement about, and we don't have to. But you have to lose money indirectly. So you don't sell an object, right? The Ran over there comments to not sell an object that's just a lack of gaining. That you don't have to do for your father. Similarly, to not work, right? But if you're not working and you're not making any money, the Jerusalem Talmud says you even have to go knocking on doors and quit your job and not work for the Talmud. In the Babylonian Talmud, we don't find this. And the Babylonian Talmud, we seemingly find, on the contrary, that you do not have to go through such a financial loss for your father, which leads the commentators to do one of two things. Either to make the Babylonian Talmud fit with the Jerusalem Talmud, or make the Jerusalem Talmud fit with the Babylonian Talmud. The one says you don't have to incur significant financial loss for your father, and the one learns the verse as saying that you have to even go knocking on doors for kibud vaem. So what do? Do we make the Jerusalem Talmud? Do we misunderstand or retranslate or try understanding the Jerusalem Talmud to really mean that you don't have to spend money on your father? Or do we say you don't have to incur loss for your father, like the Babylonian Talmud, and try understand the Jerusalem Talmud in a way that fits with the Babylonian Talmud? So you have some commentaries who say that when the Babylonian Talmud says you don't have to spend money on your father for kibud vaem, that's talking in a case when your father has his own money. But if your father doesn't have his own money, you have to spend all your money, even if it means you'll be knocking on the doors to collect money for your father. So they essentially side with the Jerusalem Talmud that says you have to go knocking on the doors for your father. And mother, yes. So you have to go knocking on doors for your father. And the reason the Babylonian Talmud says you don't have to incur a financial loss for your father, as in you don't have to spend your own money on your father, that's if your father has, so why shouldn't he spend the money for himself? But if he doesn't have, then you do have to. That's the one side. The other side says not so. The other side says that the Jerusalem Talmud, when it says you have to go knocking on doors for your father, that's only if you don't make income as a result of your father. meaning you're not working, you don't spend the time making money, and because you're not spending the time making your money, you don't have an income and end up knocking on the door for yourself. But you don't have to go knocking on doors to collect money for your father. And if your father doesn't have money, you still don't have to spend your own money for your father as far as kibud vaem goes. Maybe there's a mitzvah of tzedakah. Tzedakah means a fifth of your money, a certain amount, a third of your money, some percent of your money you have to spend on tzedakah, and you have to give that to your father. But you don't have to spend all your money on your father. But that's not kibud vaem. That's the mitzvah of tzedakah. Yeah. So this is the two ways of studying the Talmud. In the Tur, one of the major commentaries, halachic books, he writes that you don't have to quit your job or not go to work one day if you can't feed yourself for the next day. This doesn't work with either explanation. Seemingly, both of them hold you don't have to go to work the next day, which leads to the third way of studying the Talmud, which is that the Jerusalem and the Babylonian Talmud have a disagreement. The Jerusalem Talmud says you have to incur significant loss. The Babylonian Talmud will tell you you don't have to incur a significant financial loss. Right? I'm going to try doing as little Talmud and halacha for today. I'm going to try keeping it more, but I just want to get the basic premise of the discussion of the three opinions. So opinion number one says you have to incur a financial loss on your father, and the only exception is if your father has money, so why is he not spending his money? Option number two says you don't have to incur a financial loss to your father, but you shouldn't have income, which means you have to give up on a certain amount of income, like not selling an expensive jewel, diamond, or like not going to work one day. That way you won't have an income. The third one says you don't have to incur a financial loss, according to the Babylonian Talmud. And according to the Jerusalem Talmud, you do have to incur a financial loss. And that's a disagreement between the two Talmuds. These are the three opinions. So the opinion that says you don't have to quit going to work the next day to have an income, that's following the third opinion that says you don't have to incur a financial loss to your father. Yeah, these are the three ways of understanding the Talmud. Now, what makes this interesting is there's a Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish writes, how is it possible that one would have to not go to work and go knocking on doors because he's doing mitzvah of kibud vaem? Any other mitzvah, would you have to do that? You wouldn't have to. So why is it that with respecting your parents, you have to not go to work and lose all your money? So the Chazon Ish says something very interesting. He says that there's something unique about kibud vaem because it's not a mitzvah which is relevant to your finances. Kibud vaem, your father pays for. You don't have to spend your money on it. It's not a mitzvah about finances. It's a mitzvah begufo. It's a mitzvah you do with your body. It's a mitzvah you do with yourself. And it doesn't have any connection to money. Whether you'll end up fundraising or not, whether you could stay rich and not spend a penny on him, you did the mitzvah. You could be homeless, you still have to do it. It's the one mitzvah which doesn't connect to finances. Why would that be? He doesn't give a proper explanation, but I would imagine the reason for that being, why do we do kibud vaem? What's the purpose of kibud vaem? Why did Hashem tell us to honor our father and mother? Anyone, any suggestions? Right, the Jerusalem Talmud says it's paying back a debt. Your parents birthed you, right? And to repay the kindness of bringing you into the world, you will keep them in the world. You will help them out. You won't pay their expenses. You'll keep them in the world. Now, bringing you into the world, whether you have a happy life, a sad life, it's irrespective. What you're thanking is not something of pleasure or of monetary value. You're thanking something, an ontological advantage of being alive, something objective about living. Even like the Rabbi Waldenberg makes an argument that even a life of misery is of value. We see this from the Talmud in Sotah, that a woman in misery it's still considered a zechut for her to live longer. There's an objective value in living, and our parents brought us into the world. Whether we enjoy life or not is irrelevant. We have to thank them for bringing us in the world. Now, the same would apply for our repayment when we're repaying them for bringing us in the world.
That's a good response. You know, there was this legal case that I think was quite recent. Did we discuss it?
I don't know.
Possibly with a child took his parents to court for bringing him to the world into such a miserable life. He tried to sue them.
So you're speaking too fast because I'm going to argue with the Chazon Ish. So yes. You have the Ran who says you could daven for people to die. You have the Rambam, the Maimonides, who said that the ultimate wicked people, they don't go to hell, they just disappear. Because the ultimate punishment is a lack of existence. You have sources this way or that way. It's not a hill I'm going to die on. I just mentioned that as an anecdote. That them bringing you into the world is what you're paying them, is what you're thanking them for, and that is an objective gratitude. That is not because of how nice you are, what the quality of life is, and therefore your repaying that debt would be Also, even if you'll be very poor, you're repaying that debt. The Jerusalem Talmud refers to it as repaying a debt. And therefore, it follows that you don't have to spend your money on your parents, but whatever you do has to go all the way. You're not thanking your parents for spending money on you. You're thanking them for bringing you in the world. That's my explanation for Chazon Ish. He doesn't write this, but this is my explanation for it. Now, before I'm going to say that I personally argue with the Chazon Ish, my argument is, first of all, I'd like to clarify that it's not Mendel Hurwitz against Rabbi Mendel Hurwitz against the Chazon Ish. I'll quote, for example, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein and many other rabbis who also would seemingly agree with what I'm about to say. But also, I'd like to argue on an emotional level. I don't like the argument being brought forth that even if your parents, for example, let me ask you a question. Let's say you've got someone who's being abused by his parents. Yeah, his parents weren't kind to him, weren't nice to him. He should feel gratitude for his parents for birthing him, even if they were horrible parents, right? The idea of repaying a debt should
maybe put that question out to the table.
Yes, what do you think?
Say about that?
Yes, I would like to hear people's opinions. The premise that your father, let's say you've got a kid whose father, let's say, hit him daily as a kid. Right? Now, I'm not discussing the halacha, because halacha, you would say that being around such a father would create trauma. So I'm not discussing the halacha, but in principle, this child should thank his father for birthing him and make him coffee whenever the father asks him to make coffee. To me, that's an unfair. What?
So that's not gratitude. That's payback. That's really.
It's a transaction.
Yeah.
It's reimbursement.
That's problem number one. Now, the halakha, according to most rabbis, does seem to be this way, that seemingly, even if your parents were bad to you, avoiding the problems of trauma and maybe it's like self-defense by not helping such a person, avoiding all these problems, the basic premise is, for me, a question. Furthermore, the idea that someone would have to become homeless to help his parents, to me, seems completely absurd. There's no way, and even if I find a halachic loophole, right, to me, the very fact that there is such a halacha is problematic. I mean, again, I'd like to put it on the table. How would you feel about your religion telling you that you have to become homeless to help your father and mother?
Less than please.
Wouldn't be happy. So I'll let the Chazon Ish know that we took a vote here and we all disagree with him. Next time I bump into him. The halachic argument I'd like to put forth is as follows. I mentioned earlier there are three ways to study the Talmud, right? There's the way of studying the Talmud that you have to spend your own money on your father, like the Jerusalem Talmud, and you don't have to if your father has his own money. The second way of studying the Talmud would be if your father, you don't have to spend any of your own money on your father ever, but consequentially, you'll become homeless in the sense that you're not making income by helping him during that time, and therefore you'll end up poor. But you do become poor to help your father. And the third one was that you do not have to incur a significant loss according to the Babylonian Talmud, and this is a disagreement between the Babylonian and Jerusalem Talmud, and therefore the Torah writes that if you won't have enough money for the next day for basic expenses, you don't have to serve your father and you could go to work. These are the three opinions. Now the Shulchan Aruch writes that you have to even become homeless by serving your father, right? Following the second opinion. But then he writes, but if you don't have enough money for the next day, then you don't have to go to work, right? Which is a very weird thing to write. The third opinion does not hold of that statement, you have to go begging for your father. Go begging for your father, according to the third opinion, is the Jerusalem Talmud. We do not follow, right? Is the question clear? So the Gra, the Vilna Gaon writes, I do not understand what the Mechaber is talking about, what the Shulchan Aruch is talking about. He contradicted himself in the very same sentence. Yeah. He holds like the second opinion or like the third opinion, right? So the Chazon Ish is clearly following the second opinion. Now the third opinion, the person who wrote that, the Rameh, he writes as part of his argument, like any other mitzvah, like going and visiting the sick, he writes. To go and visit the sick, you don't have to incur a significant financial loss, right? So I would argue, according to the third opinion rejects wholeheartedly what the Chazon Ish wrote. The fact that you have to incur a significant financial loss for this mitzvah as unique, because this mitzvah is about, paying gratitude for bringing it to the world, and therefore finances don't exist, right? The Rameh, he himself compares it to going and visiting the sick, right? It's like any other mitzvah, you don't have to, incur a significant financial loss for. And this is even quoted on Shulchan Aruch by the commentators. No one points out this contradiction, but it seems as though they would be accepting this opinion. Following this opinion, just like any mitzvah, you don't have to incur a significant financial loss for, be that a fifth of your money, be that anything. You don't have to incur such a loss for respecting your father and mother. Meaning, any serious effect to your life, even if it's not financial, like for example, if let's say your father tells you, let's say someone's father's got dementia. I don't know if anyone's seen that film, My Father or Father, a recent film that came out last year or this year even, in which father gets the dementia, and the kid starts taking care of his father, and then he starts slowly, he can't go to work, and he puts his whole life on pause to take care of his father with dementia. Does the child have to, quit his life and spend the rest of his life taking care of his father? Right? This is definitely the equivalent of a fifth of your money. It's a very significant effect, whether it's financial or not. The value of having a job, of living your life, having free time itself is such a value you shouldn't have to give up for a positive mitzvah. You should not have to give up for the mitzvah of kibud vaem. We have Moshe Feinstein, who ruled that psychological health is of value as a fifth of someone's money. I think your psychological health will be seriously impacted if you have to constantly take care of a parent with dementia, for example. So according to this third opinion, you could argue that you do not have to spend a significant financial loss to take care of your parents, right? What about the reasoning of the Chazon Ish? You're thanking them for bringing you into the world, like the Talmud says. So surely you have to repay that in any way. So I'd like to mention another reason you have to repay your parents. Another argument as to why, and I saw this recently, Rabbi Antoli, the Abarbanel mentions this, as well as the Bechor Shor. These are all 14th, 13th, 12th century rabbis. So these are all very early rabbis. Well, the Abarbanel was a bit later. And then recently, Rabbi Steinsaltz, in his English to the Chumash, he also wrote this explanation. And I also wrote an article, a movie review on Pay It Forward, which I will send to Rabbi Hoch, and he's going to, I guess, forward it, or he won't. In which I also made this argument and well elaborated. When the Torah promises a reward for respecting your father and mother, he says, "Lema'an ya'arichun yamecha," with a nun, so that this should make your life longer. Torah promises you respect your parents and you respect your father and mother. This, the very fact that you respect your father and mother, will make your life longer. That's the reward. The mitzvah itself is the reward. By respecting your father and mother, your life will become longer.
Not necessarily.
You'll have a longer life, but not just as a divine, mystical reward. The mitzvah itself will cause the reward. The mitzvah itself will cause that you'll have a longer life. How will it cause you have a longer life? So, for example, the Tosfot on Chumash, I believe it's the Tosfot on Chumash, that they write that your parents will pray for you, and that will make you have a longer life. There are different explanations, but the rabbis I quoted earlier, Rabbi Antoli, Yaakov Antoli, Abarbanel, Bechor Shor, and I mentioned Rabbi Steinsaltz, and many more. I saw a feminist translation to the Chumash. I doubt it's orthodox, but they also suggested such a...
And that's a done deal.
Well, if the feminists say, right, it might have been a woman's translation. I don't remember what it was. It was definitely something which is not completely orthodox. Or maybe it is. I don't want to talk out of line.
That was an assumption.
Right, stereotyping. The argument is as follows, right? James Baldwin said, kids have never been good at... James Baldwin, he wrote about the African-American community, like in the American ghettos and these places, and what it was like to grow up there. And he wrote, kids have never been good at listening to their parents, but they never fail to imitate them. I think that's a great quote. And I think that's essentially what the Torah is promising. People who take care of their parents, their kids will take care of them. So the Torah says, respect your father and mother. Why? It's going to make your life longer. It's good for you. It's not for your parents. It's not an altruistic thing you're doing. Your kids will take care of you if you take care of your parents. So I would argue that the Chazon Ish is coming from a hashkafic perspective. He's saying, to me it feels wrong that you don't have to do kibud vaem in a case where you'll financially lose out from the mitzvah. Right? Now, he could pick between second or third option halachically, but he's saying you should do everything you could for your parents. The mitzvah was given to take care of your parents. I could argue, right, the mitzvah was given to repay them for birthing you, but the mitzvah was also given for another reason. What's the other reason the mitzvah was given? The mitzvah was given so that your kids will take care of you when you're older, right? I would not want my kids to put their life on pause for me. In the Talmud it says that with Rabbi Akiva, if you see water on the, if you see the water, and you have water on you, and you could drink it, or your friend could drink it, or you could both drink it and you'll both die. So you could either both drink it and have a little gain. We once spoke, I believe, over here about in game theory, have a similar idea. Right? There's a certain amount of profit we could all share, right? Now, if we go down 50-50, we'll both gain significantly less than if one of us takes the whole thing, right? So should we say, let's say toss a coin, one of us gets the full bottle, or let's split it 50-50. That's essentially the question in game theory. Which means if we go 50, let's say there's $1,000, and if we split it, we both get $100. Should we both get $100, or should we flip a coin and we both get $1,000? That's a question in game theory. So the Bright, I think it is, says, or the Mishnah, says a disagreement, and the way we follow the halacha is chayecha kodmin. Your life comes first, right? And this principle can be taken further, not just to life and death, but in life. It's a principle in life. Your life comes first. The Talmud says you find an avedah on the floor, you find a lost object, and your father's lost object, you could do kibud vaem, return your father's object. Your father lost something, you could return it. Says the Talmud, however, shelcha kodem l'shel kol adam. You come first. You come first, any person. The Talmud continues, however, if someone lives by that principle, he'll end up coming to this. If someone's going to live by the principle, I won't return my father's avedah, it will eventually happen to him. So the Ben Ish Chai on this Talmud writes, a famous story from the Grimm's brothers originally, but it actually predates the Grimm's brothers, and it's the story of the child. He sees his grandfather by the homeless shelter, and his grandfather wants a coat because it's cold. So his father gives him a worn-out coat. He cuts the coat in half, and he tells, his father asks him, why are you cutting the coat in half? So he tells his father, well, I'll give grandpa the one half, and when I'll kick you out of my home, and my son will come asking for the coat, I'll give you the other half of this coat. So the Ben Ish Chai says that's what this means. In principle, you come first. But if you live, you come first. You don't have to help your father. You come first. That's the principle in life. But if you live by that principle, it's going to end up happening to you. So I would argue the same applies to kibud vaem in general. That's the attitude we should have for kibud vaem. A kid should always do as much as he could as possible to make his parents happy. But if you're respecting your parents to the extent you wouldn't want your kids to do this for you, I wouldn't want my kid to quit his life and give up on his aspirations to take care of me in dementia. I'd prefer him to put me up in some old age home or something. Then I don't think I should be doing that for my father either. And with that, I conclude my class, and my father's going to give the rebuttal.